So let me tell you a little bit about who Andrew is. He's both a certified information systems security professional and a certified in risk and information systems control. His extensive background includes pivotal roles in Leidos, CrowdStrike, and IBM, and where he led development of complex security systems, managed and led large security operations centers, and transformed cybersecurity and risk management programs for both federal organizations as well as Fortune 500 private sector organizations. At Todyl, where he is today, he supports MSP and MSSP channels at large in security program development and security solutioning and go-to-market efforts. Andrew's technical expertise spans threat intelligence, SOC operations, zero trust implementations, security architecture, and comprehensive threat detection and remediation strategy on all of that is to say that he brings to you now what you can do on a personal basis today. And he's a recognized thought leader, and it has contributed to numerous publications and spoken at industry events, specifically on sharing his knowledge of threat moves and he holds several industry recognized certificates as well that are mentioned. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Andrew and put you in his hands for the next several minutes, and then I'll come back to you with to respond to your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really excited to be speaking with you all today. That was obviously a lot. Appreciate the good, in-depth introduction. I think, the bottom line, right, for everyone there in the room, I like to say that I've seen a lot. And so really what I want to share with you all today is sort of peeling back the onion. We're going to kind of go through a journey together. It could be a little bit scary, cybercrime, a lot of things we don't know, right? But, there is a plan and there's hope and a strategy. So we're going to work through something scary, what this maybe means for you all as individuals, as maybe business leaders, business owners, maybe people right? And you want to kind of share some of what you hear today with them. But ultimately, what can we do, right, about this? It doesn't necessarily have to be as scary as we think if we have a plan, a strategy. So that's really what I want to unpack, with you all today. First and foremost, thank you for, to Carl and others in the team at the A&I for having this, as well as our security, partner there, John with ABT there as well. We'll get into that later. But I just kind of want to actually just let's dive into it here. So what I'm going to be talking about is, obviously the implications of cybercrime. What is it? What drives when we hear about hackers and cyber criminals? Really, why are they going after you all, both right as individuals, investors, various things like that? What makes you attractive, but also for businesses, right? Why is there that lens that they're trying to target you all? And really, what does that mean for that risk? So we're going to start to unpack this today. Like I said, I'm going to go through the evolving threat landscape. I'm going to give us some examples. Now, this may look, I know we have, both business and individual perspectives there online and in the room. So, I'll be navigating both of these as we talk about it. But, examples of these threats you're going to face, right? You heard already mentioned, phishing attacks, scams, also for business owners, what's called business email compromise or data theft extortion. This can mean a lot of, different things and can be kind of, I don't know what that means for me, but we're going to unpack that and kind of some to, kind of, gauge there. And then really, what can we do about it? And then open it up for Q&A. Okay. So, obviously, introduction there, but, really about myself, I am the field CISO here at Total. I love doing these types of events, get out in the community, kind of educating people about what they're facing, but what we can do. And the bottom line is, I just want to share everything that I've seen throughout my career and kind of the work that we do and so forth, but unpack that, for what that really means for you all. So, to dive in, I think it's important to take a step back, right, and really acknowledge what's actually unique about all of you in the room, right? About A&I, about the people on the Zoom call, and there's a lot of what you have is really what's of desire. Cyber criminals fundamentally are very financially motivated, right? We hear about extortions, we hear about maybe ransom, we hear about having to pay money to unlock systems and accounts and stolen data. And so this is really that first priority they're going to have is if you have something of value that they want, they're going to find a way to try and go target you for that, right? So really being cognizant, I think, for individuals of what sensitive information do you have, whether that's your own personal information, your social security numbers, your date of birth, right, your names, your addresses, things that may seem somewhat innocuous or are more private, but in the hands of cyber criminals can really lead to identity theft, stolen funds, right? Access to your own, information, but also, right? Think about the financial information, your bank accounts, your investment accounts, a lot of, what you deal with there, and what you're entrusting to many organizations. That's of desire. So it's not just of targeting you; it's also of who you're doing business with, what business you do, right? And so the lens of why they're going to try and target individuals, maybe high net worth individuals, people, organizations managing that even is really just because there's that value in those relationships to exploit, right? They're either going to try and scam their way in to get access to those accounts, to the information or whatever you do business with, but also your own personal information, right? They're not against just going directly at individuals for these scams and extortion mechanisms. Okay. For businesses, it's also about stealing that data, right? Or locking up your operations and preventing you from being able to do business. And this is what's called ransomware or data theft extortion. And there's some ways that they're conducting these attacks, but simply trying to cause you enough pain, so to speak, by being unable to run operations, to seize control of your systems, your data, stuff that would be potentially damning if it was leaked. And they will leak and release that for against businesses if so. But really, they see a lot of small, medium-sized businesses or individuals as just unfortunately having a less mature security posture. Okay, so that's the other thing. Just because you're smaller doesn't mean you're not a target. In fact, you're an easier target. So it's really important to kind of accept that and acknowledge that, no matter of size, you're still a target also because of simply what you have. Now, if we look at most likely threats, right? So obviously, cybercrime is number one. These are scammers, these are hackers, these are people trying to get access to your information, trying to defraud you in various ways. But also I think, supply chain attacks. And so what I mean by this is really thinking about technologies you use. Could be your device, your laptop. It could be keeping software up to date, right? Where, they're exploiting or using kind of holes or flaws in security tools, right? Or various different operating systems like Windows or Mac or your mobile phone or websites even that they're going to compromise to try to gain information or to try to find a way into deeper information there, okay, or systems that you may have. Also, insider threats, okay? So this is primarily for business owners or people who run businesses, but insider threats, it doesn't have to be malicious, all right? This can be just an employee who unfortunately has too much access to things and accidentally emails out, contact lists. I've been there. I've seen that happen. We've had to, kind of manage that, right? But it also could be simply, someone who's disgruntled, someone who's on their way out and trying to download information they may use later. It's hard to really gauge if people are or not going to be malicious, but it's how much do we trust people within our organization too, and how do we monitor and secure that? So that's where insider threat really comes into play too. So for those of you who are running or part of an organization, really kind of evaluating what do people have access to? Do you need that? Or if their account was compromised, let's say, or their email, what could they gain access to, right? So the current situation, with all that in mind, what we are seeing is just a rapid increase in cybercrime, right? Where $10.5 trillion is the projected damages by cyber criminals in 2020 by the end of 2025 here. That's the whole country's GDPs. That's insane. It is a massive business that everyone, the barrier to entry is increasingly dropping as well. And this is because we see artificial intelligence, the rise of, various different cyber criminal groups and helping others. But what that means is also they're shifting tactics and the ways they're going to, conduct those attacks towards individuals and businesses alike, to be much more scalable. And the way that they're doing this is that big red box, identity. So what do I mean by identity? I mean, it's your login, your email and password. It's your user login to your company systems. It's about being able to steal that information so they can impersonate you and then gain access to what your information is there. And they continually count on that users and organizations are less mature in terms of their security posture and ability to kind of thwart attacks in this way. And so this is really where they're shifting. So we like to say they're not hacking in, they're logging in. So really being cognizant of strong, unique password use. I'll get into some of these mitigations later, but I want to start early and talk about it. One of the best ways to battle against a lot of this is just simply using unique, strong passwords for every different account. That can be hard to remember all these different passwords, but that's where I'd really encourage use of, let's say, a password manager. All right, so these are, you remember one password, it logs, kind of all the different passwords you need, and it auto-fills that for any site you need to go to. But it simplifies that. Also using multi-factor authentication. So this is either the text message you get on your phone with a little 6-digit code or 8-digit code. It can be used in an authenticator app like Google or Microsoft Authenticator. There's things to say, yep, it's just an extra level of proving that you are who you say you are to gain access to those systems. This is a great way of battling against that, okay? But when we look at kind of the implications of all of these attacks and what we're seeing, 47% of small businesses, right? I mentioned no organization's too small to be targeted, suffered an attack of last year. It's almost half of all attacks. And 31% of clients, for those in the business realm, right there in the room or on the Zoom, 31% of clients will terminate that relationship with a business following a data breach. I'm sure many of us have gotten that, oh, your data was compromised, or there's this class action lawsuit, or go ahead and sign up for free credit monitoring. And unfortunately, we're all getting jaded to it, right? It's like, oh, it's another one. I have to admit, I sometimes am like, well, there goes my information again. But it also feels kind of like a violation. Like I entrusted an organization with my information or my livelihood or what have you. And so how are you protecting that? And so every time there is a breach, it really causes clients and people to evaluate, what does that mean for me? And so 3 times more likely are small businesses to be targeted than larger companies. And that is because of the less mature security posture and capabilities that unfortunately are just also because they just don't have the budgets often to afford a lot of the big security tools and capabilities that many big businesses have. And so therefore cyber criminals are going to go after them. So, right, this is really kind of both a business, but also an individual implication. They're going after any mechanism they can find here. And so this also validates what I'm kind of highlighting, and I want everyone to really think about is what your protections are as an individual or as a business that you're running, where it's now, like I said, about the identity, okay, but they're also targeting for business owners, let's say, the use of a VPN, virtual private networks. This is a way that supposedly masks, right, how your users are securing that access into environments. But unfortunately, right, in company networks, fortunately, cyber criminals are targeting, exploiting, and breaking those too. It's also that where I'm saying about supply chain. They're trying to say, I know you work with X business. I'm going to actually pretend to be that business and ask you to pay an invoice to my cyber criminal's own bank account and not the legitimate one. That's called business email compromise. We'll get into that in a moment. But that also impacts, right, the individual users. We see that in scams, various other things in fraud that is occurring in the way that both individuals and businesses are targeted. So it's about who do you know? Who do you have relationships with? Who are you openly advertising you have that relationship with? Something that could be your biggest brand or promotion material. If we've got a partnership with this business, also makes them or you a great target to get access to the other party. So it may not be about you, it may be about who you do business with, and you may be the target of how they're going to get access to someone else. Okay. So, I want to talk about fraud. And this is especially, I think, important for the individual, personas in the room, right? You yourselves are amazing targets in the eyes of an adversary or a cyber criminal. 83% of all losses reported to the FBI in the internet crimes report that they release every year. 83% of all losses last year came from cyber-enabled fraud. What we mean by that is stolen credentials, such as business email compromise. It could be investment scams. It could be, employment scams, right? Or kind of, fraudulent aspects there, lottery, sweepstakes, etc. One of the best, kind of pieces of guidance that we typically give is if it seems like it's too good to be true, it probably is. You probably just didn't win $50 million from some Nigerian prince. That's definitely a scam. Unfortunately, those scams and frauds are getting more and more realistic, right? Where they're using information that you are announcing publicly, that you're passionate about. So looking at what's my exposure on social media? What am I liking? What am I saying I'm a big fan about? It's even the idea of, getting you to click a phishing link of check out this cool cat video, right? We kind of saw that happen quite, often in the past, but it's about, using what the lures, we like to call them, right? What you find interesting and what attracts you, what will cause someone to click on a link. Okay. So being mindful about, right, is this too good to be true? Did I ask for this person's, kind of a current urgent, notice or invoice or some sort of form to fill out or not? These phishing scams will almost always have some level of urgency or consequence if you don't do this immediately. And that's designed to get people to really click on that. But that's what drives a lot of these scams here that we're looking at. So if we look at this graph here on the left, there's some really key items I want to call out. First is obviously the losses, and the biggest red bar in the middle is investment scams. So this is obviously, kind of, hey, invest in this, Ponzi schemes, other things like that, but where, give me money and we'll see more revenue or return from there, but where they're kind of reaching out to users on social media, various other components, to be able to, or methods to be able to access you all. So really be cautious of that, right? The second largest one is more for the what's called business email compromise. Now, this seems more business focused because predominantly it is, but this is where they're stealing those credentials, right? That email and password to get access to to business environments, and then they're actually pretending to be that person. And so they're either communicating with others in the organization, maybe other vendors they do business with to scam them out of something, or they're actually assuming the access of whatever that user email is. So if we think about, right, if we have a Gmail account or we've got for business like maybe Microsoft Office 365, let's think about everything you have access to there. It's not just what's in your email. It might be your share drive folder. It might be where you're storing your tax returns, your personal information. It might be about, kind of your company's intellectual property or financial statements or various things. So really identifying what you have access to and using a login. I think that's a key thing for folks to take home is how am I protecting whatever I have access to log into, and what does that mean for me or for our business? But what we see on the flip side, especially for business owners, right, there's a positive aspect to really kind of then enforcing security in some ways. We see that, this is from a fraud report focused more on real estate, but 79% of consumers were willing to pay more for a more secure experience, even if there were additional hurdles or costs associated with this. And this, in this case, is related to like real estate wire, kind of investments and things like that to be able to do mortgage closing, title companies, et cetera. But thinking about it, for those who are business owners, right, who deal with customer information, there is a desire and an interest of consumers to actually protect that information, and they're willing to spend more if it means that their own business, that their business or who they're doing business with is actually protecting their information and their livelihoods more as well. So, just kind of that balance there, especially for individuals versus businesses. But, we see that users and organizations and businesses alike are all just really willing to invest more in security that protects their ultimate livelihood and bottom line as well. So the financial implications of fraud and scams, what could this all mean for you? So a personal story, my aunt unfortunately got scammed pretty hard with some investment in gift carding scams. Maybe think, how could she fall for that? Well, they made it pretty believable. They made it seem like it was coming from her granddaughter who actually was asking for gift cards for college. And they had her driving around the middle of the night in Indianapolis to go buy $3,000 worth of gift cards that her granddaughter needed. She only started to figure out this was kind of crazy after going to 2 or 3 different gas stations. But the financial implications, the $3,000 she was, kind of starting to spend, they come in all types. Okay, and they're designed to be believable. And as I mentioned, it's all demographics that are targeted, especially it says high net worth, excuse me, individuals, a typo there. So they're going to use what you're putting out on social media. They're going to recognize you like certain pages, like certain trends, that you have, children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, cousins, sisters, brothers, parents, all of that, and how you communicate. So being aware of what am I exposing to the internet on social media, especially, because those are lures that we're seeing being used, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. Some folks may have heard of deep fakes. Okay, so this is actually using AI to mimic how someone sounds, what their face looks like, even a video. But we see where there's unfortunately even scams where it sounds like it's a child or a grandchild, or maybe it's a sister or brother on the phone asking for help or money. That in some cases can be a AI-driven deepfake to scam a user out of it, right? So kind of pick up the phone, don't go wire anything, pick up the phone, call whomever that is, right? Be really careful about acknowledging that because that's a new trend we're seeing too. But just looking at the numbers on the right here, y'all, I want to make sure it's really, these are by complaint loss annually, but this is a sheer significant amount of money that is being lost to fraud and scams. And so again, bottom line, just if it's too good to be true, it probably isn't. If you're curious or doubt it, just pick up the phone, call someone, don't wire that money, don't process that invoice, kind of really get in touch with that person, have multiple methods of validation, right, to ensure that you're not, kind of being targeted some scam where you're taken seriously, right? That extra phone call, that extra, little effort could save a lot of money, but also, protect not just yourself, but others. So shifting into, some of the business stuff here, I mentioned business email compromise. And so I want to kind of really, kind of unpack this because this is really important, right? For especially anybody in business or who knows people who are in it. This is what's driving a lot of the financial cybercrime right now. So as I mentioned, they'll gain access to legitimate business emails and they'll use this to do several different things. So like, for instance, they'll say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor that you have, we've changed up our billing or invoicing system. Can you actually make a payment over to this bank account? And people fall for this often, and often it's thousands of dollars. We have a client here, Todyl, one of our clients, has a client themselves who accidentally wired about $400,000 worth to a cyber criminal. So, being cognizant of, like I said, picking up that phone, but also because that account, that person's email and password was compromised, suddenly that cyber criminal was able to watch and learn how that user and that victimized user communicated, how they spoke, who they were talking to, and they injected themselves into the middle of those conversations. They might impersonate a business owner or a CEO. Be like, hey, can you please go make this purchase real quick? Don't do it, right? Obviously that's where the pressure is. Like it's the CEO asking, am I going to say no? Just pick up the phone, right? Kind of, double check. Also check your processes around validating this or how you're going to handle that. or they're stealing that intellectual property that's key and critical to your business, right, or your organization. Maybe not even intellectual property, it could be just sensitive information, it could be financial information, it could be anything else. And the goal there is they're going to take that, they're either going to extort you for it, so they're going to charge you money. You give me, X amount, and I'll give you your data back, or they will actually sell that on what's called the dark web, where other cyber criminals will operate, and that can be used for identity theft, further extortion, things like that. So really, that AI and the criminal underground, the dark web, is driving a lower barrier to entry for how cyber criminals are attacking businesses with this, and that's because of AI, allowing them to do this much more, kind of at scale, at a larger scale, as well as a lot more believably. And then the sale of those credentials. So a cybercrime group, some actually specialize with just stealing usernames and passwords and selling that. I've seen it for as low as even $2 on the dark web in some of my past experience. To other cyber criminals who may want to buy that and then use that for their own purposes. So again, right, really getting at, what's the key, kind of common denominator here. It's emails and passwords and multi-factor authentication. Really ensure you've got that unique, complex password. I'm repeating it again, you hear, right? And multi-factor turned on, whether that's an app, that's a code, something like that. And that goes for both everyday individuals to every portal you access, even though it may be a little bit of a pain, or right, any business that's leveraging this. For businesses, I mentioned they may steal that data and then say, give me money back, right, in order to get this. This is where we see, from at least the business perspective, frankly, this is a response to cyber defenders. We're getting a lot better at battling what's called that ransomware, where I'm going to log in or access a company's environment. I'm going to encrypt and lock out all of those systems. No one can do any work. Systems are down, they can't function, no one can do anything, right? And that's what's called ransomware. So defenders we're getting a lot better actually at battling that, which is great. And so the cyber criminals are adapting to us now and shifting to actually just logging into environments. And then they're finding where that sensitive information is, even if that's in just a shared drive folder or an email. And then they're going to steal that information. And then they're going to come to you and say, I want money. I've got your data. You can't do anything about it. I'm now going to leak this information. I'm going to call regulators. We see that increasingly. I'm going to, start calling your own employees, vendors you have, et cetera. There's multiple methods of extortion with this. And we see that the data theft is the new ransomware normal. Like demands are on average $600,000 when they're stealing this, because they can now get a lot more aggressive, because now it's about the data that's gone, not just systems we can't access. So this is that evolution that I'd really encourage any business owner, business leader, people who are part of businesses right now, or people who are, really, what is the value of your business's data, and what is the implications there if it was stolen, right? Is that ransom, right, or that extortion amount there that's identified simply too much to bear? It might be. And the positive thing, for at least for individuals, is we don't see this really being waged against direct individuals. This is businesses that are facing a lot of the data theft extortion. Okay. Again, more of individual targeting is definitely scams, fraud, investment or wiring money, right? Kind of also extorting on, maybe, hey, I've got some salacious pictures of you, even if that's totally false. It kind of pulls at people, but this is more of a business risk and threat than individuals. Okay. So what does this mean for both of you all, right? As I'm kind of getting at, really, I think it's important to step back and be like, what is it that my business or our business or business people that we know, or myself and as an individual, what is it that's really important to me? Okay. So if we look at this from the lens of both, kind of business and individual, it could be about your strategic risk of, I'm trying to, pursue a big, kind of new business venture, or I'm choosing to invest a lot of money in an organization and or something like that. And I can't live without that. That's a big gamble for me. Targeting that, right? Or the implications of derailing that investment or that business initiative could be pretty damning for a business or an individual. It could be about stealing that intellectual property that creates competitive advantages, right? Or it's about just simply like we're talking about the financial risk. Simply how much money could you lose without it becoming simply too much, whether that's through fraud, whether that's through ransom, extortion, a breach and downtime. That's really a personal or business decision that you all need to make. But it's an important one that really needs to be considered is what is too much. And that could be zero, right? But then we have to be able to make sure we're securing to that level of zero to make sure there is no loss, right? We all know probably there's no way to have zero risk, but that's a personal decision. It also can include legal risk, right? So this is where if there's violations of fines, depending on the type of business organization that it does, are you losing data? Are you facing class action lawsuits because you lost too many people's information? We see an increase in that as well for businesses. Or where there's contractual obligations that are because you couldn't meet contract obligations because of, let's say, delivery, operations, etc. Right? It's always, there's always other people we're doing business with and they rely upon us or that we're working with. And that means that, if something impacts us or them, it impacts the other party as well, right? So being cognizant of, do we have contracts or legal obligations or things like that we're required to adhere to in terms of timeliness or protecting our partnerships there. Obviously, compliance risk is a big one, but reputation, right? And I think this impacts also individuals, right? We see where, hey, extorting individuals, putting their name out there. We'll see that where individuals are targeted and say, hey, especially in what's called, unfortunately, sextortion scams. So these are where, hey, a cyber criminal is saying, I've got really kind of, salacious, inappropriate pictures of you. I'm going to release them to your friends and family. Most people don't have these photos or have not taken them. But that pressure, that emotional connection of, oh my God, was there something? Is this going to be leaked? Is my reputation going to be damaged? That's where they're leaning on. They're counting on that psychological vulnerability that you're going to then, okay, I'll pay you. Please, I don't even know if it's real. And that's again where AI stepping in. But the reputation of what is my personal or business's reputation worth to me, to others, to my family? What if it got out? What if I lost data? What if kind of my name got dragged into it? What if we couldn't be trusted? What does that mean for us? And so these are all things I think that both individuals and businesses alike just really would encourage everyone to consider so that you can make the best choices to protect yourself or how much you're willing to risk or not. And again, as I was saying, cyber risk, it goes both ways. Okay, it's not just you; it's also customers, vendors, financial institutions. It's your investors. It's suppliers, your employees who are counting on you maybe for a paycheck, right? And so this has broader implications than just also impacting a business or business owners or individuals. And so, just taking a look at a couple of these statistics by numbers, you recognize I'm big on numbers and statistics because it gives us understanding and validation of what we are not comfortable with. 43%, of all attacks are on SMB. Already kind of referenced some of that before, where, we talk about, an incident, but there's also the recovery from that. It's not just the ransom or the extortion or what happened. It's also being able to, build everything back to normal. And so that can be between $826 to over $1 million is what we see, where the SMBs will spend to recover from a cyber incident. So, is an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure? Most definitely. But unfortunately, that more vulnerable target, we see that, SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses. So that's really, think about, 150 employees and below, or individuals, obviously, are going to have, really a lot, reduced security posture. You're not going to be as strong and as resilient as big businesses, right? It takes a lot of time, energy, money, et cetera. But especially for phishing, right? We see that little, kind of blue hacker on the right, but small, medium-sized businesses and also, individuals to a certain extent receive one phishing email in every 323 cents. So that's an average of 121 emails a day per employer user, right? So these are becoming more and more believable. They're becoming more and more advanced. And so they're targeting everybody. I even get them on personal email sometimes just because they know who I am, what I do, the relationships I have. And yeah, my personal emails out there, right? There's data, breaches all the time of emails information. So that's how this gets out. So even if, oh, well, it's just my email got released, so that's a value to a cyber criminal, and they're going to use that to then, I now know your email. I'm going to send you a believable phishing email or something like that. Okay. And then, kind of rounding out here of some of the costs to consider, we've seen, especially since the pandemic, that the cost of dealing with breaches is increasing, right? And this is, again, considering more of for business owners there, or business, focused people there in the room or online. But, pre-pandemic, it was about $897, right, to $25,000 or so. So still substantial amount of money. But now we look at the average costs post-pandemic and the high end, and this is because of business partnerships. It's because of adoption of the cloud, like Google, Microsoft, right? Putting things up into a virtual system, not necessarily stored on a hard drive or on a server or a physical system. And because of all this, the reach and cost and implications of breaches is just significantly growing, right? So really, again, I just encourage folks to take a look at these numbers and be like, am I comfortable with this? Is this too much for me to spend or to potentially lose? Whether it's even an example of investment money lost, right? Your own financial information, right? Well, how much are you willing to lose? I think that's the big takeaway. But how much are you willing to also then invest, let's say of your own, to be able to then, kind of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Let's get ahead of these things beforehand. And so I want to now talk about positivity. I've been painting a pretty bleak picture for about a half an hour or so. Um, there's a path forward. So what can we do? For business owners, really, I'd encourage you to just think about, do I have a strategy? And this can be kind of hard. Like, I don't even know where to start. Well, there's a lot of standards. There's a lot of help out there, right? That's where, really what drew me to want to work with managed service providers, managed security service providers here, coming to Todyl, is the ability to reach, right, kind of the small, medium-sized businesses in the mainstream of America that really needs help on what is, a strategy I need to employ. But, some key points there really around the strategy is just almost starting with, what's my business, or what do I do, or what do I have using it as an individual, and where am I using technology? Is it email? Is it on my phone? Is it, kind of, I've got a business, I've got, a laptop, maybe I've got, access to a cloud resource like Google Drive or Microsoft or various things. And then what am I putting in there, right? And this is, you see this, kind of bar chart on the left of identify down to recover, and then various different colors. And this is just really a visual guide, but this is actually what's called the NIST cybersecurity framework. We're identifying what we have. How important is that? What do we need to protect that? Can I make sure I'm getting alerts of when someone's trying to access my account, or I've had a, kind of bank transfer that's suddenly sudden? Maybe I need to be doing more of that. How do I respond to that? Can I stop that transaction? Can I cut off access to these systems? Can I put a halt to a certain user email, right? Can I, kind of kill, or stop malware that may be, kind of, or attacks happening on my devices? And then what does recovery look like? How can I learn from what happened? How can we reduce the time that we're down? How can I do these various things? So I'm very kind of high level outlining what's called that NIST cybersecurity framework as a strategy. But this is really where I think just businesses understanding, or individuals, what's of value to me? How am I using technology? What exposure do I have, wherever that might be? And then what am I doing about it? Or am I okay with that risk of not having protections? Again, it's a risk-based decision there. So really, what can you do, right? I've kind of mentioned some of these points here to address these risks. But for everyone, individuals and businesses alike, right? Eliminate your blind spots. know what you have, what's of value to you, where it lives, and then really just ensure you've got multi-factor authentication, right? Whether that's an app, whether that's just logging, having, your phone get sent that code, have it on for everywhere and for every account. We keep seeing this happen is, where this is, kind of not in place and people are getting compromised left and right, right? For business owners, also, if cyber insurance is something you're thinking about, oftentimes if MFA is not on everywhere, those claims can be denied. All right. So being mindful for those in the business realm there, the MFA is kind of a mandatory requirement often for many insurance providers, cyber insurance providers. And so this is just a good best practice in general. Unique passwords. This, again, is basic cyber hygiene, but I really encourage everyone to have a unique password for every portal or platform you log into. Okay. Reuse of passwords is what makes a lot of these credential and identity attacks a lot easier to gain access to either your own personal systems, personal accounts, business accounts, etc. And then just really be mindful of reducing your exposure online, right? And that's the social media component where, cyber criminals, they're going to now take the time to learn and identify more about you, right? Who are you doing business with? What do you like? How are you going to make that phishing link believable because it's about something that I know you care about? And this is kind of a next level of phishing called, spear phishing, where they're going to target certain individuals or certain talk tracks or topics there, right? Understanding yourself. It can be really easy to get sucked into a lot of the threats and the fear and the things that we talked about to begin with. But orgs often or individuals sometimes miss what's important to me. What are my crown jewels? What can I not live without? What can we not operate without? What would be too, damning if we lost it? And that gives you a perspective also of what do I actually need to protect versus what's extra, and then really focus on those crown jewels and what matters to you. Even if that's your own financial information, your investment or bank accounts, just start there, right? Just start with that 1%, make something better today. Prevent, detect, or respond rapidly. This is more of a business, component, but also for individuals. Ensure you've got some level of endpoint security, antivirus, some sort of ability to get alerted if something fraudulent or malicious is happening in your environment, and be able to do something about it very quickly, whether that's calling your bank to stop a transfer or to put a freeze on an account or something like that, or a business, right? Maybe you need to be able to, isolate a system. You need to suspend a user. You need to be able to, address those threats very quickly. But the key takeaway here is speed. Cyber criminals are getting incredibly fast at what they're doing. And so how fast can you react and learn to what's going on in your environment? Don't click that link. Like I said, if phishing is becoming more and more believable, just think twice. You can, there's strategies there of obviously using, kind of phishing, kind of tools and things like that to protect emails and filter some of that stuff out. Those are paid resources you can get as a business or also as an individual. Some antivirus vendors also have email protections built in. I have one myself. But I think also promoting user awareness training. If you're a business, right, just, ensuring your folks and your staff are aware, right, of what, kind of recent phishing tests are, run those tests, but also don't vilify, right? Don't create a culture of blame if people fail, right? Because that's where people start not reporting certain security issues or events happening. So you really promote that awareness of cybersecurity hygiene, of, threats and being willing to talk about that. Patch your devices, right? So, this is the updates we often see on our laptops or our desktops. And they can kind of be a pain that they keep popping up, but make sure those are getting done. These are these vulnerabilities that cyber criminals going to look, these flaws and holes in systems. They're going to actually be able to know how to take advantage of those and to kind of punch their way in through those holes and flaws to gain access to systems or data. Okay. Same thing goes for your browser for individuals. If you use Chrome or something else, you may see, hey, relaunch for an update. It takes a couple seconds. Your browser windows or portals will come back up, but make sure that you're keeping that up to date because we see a lot of this, browser exploits and being out of date. cyber criminals are targeting actually how users are browsing, interacting with the internet, right? So keep that up to date. But the bottom line is just try to set, kind of automated patching. There's a way to do that with keeping your updates going. And honestly, find help if you need it. Whether that's if you're a business from an MSP or an MSSP, if you're an individual, there's plenty of resources out there. I'm more than happy to also share my contact info. If anyone's just, hey, want to dive into further what you mentioned, something like that. Obviously John with, I'm into business technologies there in the room as well. Great, amazing resource. Who runs a MSP that can provide some of this guidance, instruction. Where do we need to start? But I think there's no harm in asking for help, right, when you need it, right? Is losing that information, that reputation or money simply too much for you? And if it is, and you can't do it yourself, do you need help? Then that's totally fine, right? So with that, there was a lot that I unpacked there, but these are really just, I think, good sound fundamental starting points that don't miss them, don't overstep these, don't skip these, but also is really what helps build that strategy and kind of protecting you all from cybercrime, whether you're an individual or whether you're a business as well. It's just those different perspectives, but these are tried and true no matter who you are. So I see that there may be a couple questions. There's my contact info. I'll make sure people have it. But I know we have a couple disclosures here that we just need to show for A&I. But yeah, figure we open it up into Q&A here if there's any questions there, either in the audience or here on the chat.